Hi, during the next few minutes I'll be describing how to create AWS Lambdas and how to manage those in a development lifecycle. Before we begin, this video assumes that you've done some initial setup. If you haven't, what you should do is go to this GitHub repo. This is a repo we'll be working in, and you'll see this initial README file has instructions on how to set up an AWS account with command line tools installed. And then also this shows you some information on how to install a tool called Cloudia.js, and we'll be using that extensively. So if you haven't done this yet, please pause this video and follow these instructions. The first thing I'm going to do is get a command prompt in the repo, and then I'm going to cd into this project called Hello World. And again, kind of the initial thing you should do in projects like this is to run npm install, if you haven't already, to grab all the dependencies you need. I've done that, so mine went fairly quickly, but initially this might take a while. There's a few dependencies for this little test project. The first thing I'd like to demonstrate is how to run the create command. Before we do that, I just want to walk through this command in a little bit of detail. So if you open up the package.json file and look under the scripts section, the first script you see here should be the create function. So the first option that I have specified here is the profile name, and this maps to the profile for our AWS instance. And you should locate a file. If you're a Mac user, it's going to be located in .aws, and the file name is going to be credentials. And in that file, you should have something that looks like, let me show you. Again, if you look at the instructions on the README file for the parent repo, you see here that you should have a section called xcomponent-lambda in the square brackets, and then you should have these two options, AWS key ID and the secret key, the password. Both of these are going to be issued according to our user in AWS, so contact Jesse for this information if you don't already have it. So that's what this option's for. The next option is a role, and what we're doing here is, again, in our AWS instance, we have an execution role that is already pre-configured and specified for Lambdas, and anyone who creates a Lambda is going to be sharing this execution role, so you don't have to create your own, but it does mean that you need to add this role option to the create command. The next option is the function name. Here I'm just calling it hello world, but I'm going to demonstrate creating this, so I'm going to change it and just add my test to it, just so that we have a unique function name here. So this thing here is the region. This is the AWS region where we're going to be hosting the function. You shouldn't really need to change that. US East 1 is going to be fine, I think. Unless you get notified that we're changing this at some point in the future, you can just leave it as is. API module, this points to the actual JavaScript code for your functions. So if you look over here on the left, I have a file called lambda.js, so that is the module. And if we look at this file, this is basically the code that you're going to be creating for your function. So let's return back to the package.json. The next option I have is I'm specifying that the initial staging version for this is going to be development. And then I also have a JSON file for any variables that we want to set that are unique to the staging environment. I'm going to go through that in a little bit more detail in a few minutes, so we'll set that aside for now. The final option I have here is a timeout. So by default, if you didn't include this, the timeout for an AWS instance is, let's see, I believe it's 6 seconds. Yeah, 6 seconds is the default timeout if you included nothing there. The max that you can go currently, so what we're talking about here is how long your function actually is going to take to return a response. So the maximum is 5 minutes. So what you want to do here is adjust it to something that's reasonable for whatever service you're calling out for, or whatever you expect your performance for your function to be. So in this particular case, I just increased it to 30 seconds. So that's the main create function. This is something that you should only have to do once. So let's pop back down to the command prompt here and actually run npm run create the function. So what we're doing here is calling out to AWS, and it's creating the function remotely and also what's called an API gateway. So you see here that we have success. Here's the URL that indicates where your endpoints are going to end up, and you can see that it already added a dev to the end of it, since up here we set our initial version to be dev. Later on, I'm going to be showing you how you can add the production endpoint to this. The last thing I'd like to show as part of the create a Lambda step is how to kind of just quickly test that your function is available and is working properly. So I switched over here to the Lambda JavaScript file, the actual function of the code. And for this little hello world example, I have two endpoints defined. The first one is a simple hello call. It also includes a token from the environment JSON, which I'm going to describe and kind of walk through in a different video. So for this one, what I will show you is a simple endpoint that I have named call. And what it does here is it simply shows the name of the function, the version, and the stage, whether it's prod or dev or testing. So this is not something you necessarily have to include, but it is kind of helpful as a quick and easy way to see what version your function is and whether it's working correctly. So having added this, what I'll do is go down here to the terminal again and just issue a simple curl call. You'll see that it begins with the function URL, and then I just simply add -call to the end of it. And now you'll see that we do have a good response back from the server. And having just created this function, you'll see that the version is set to 1. The stage is set to dev. That was part of our initial create call. And you'll see the name also is hello world-mytest, the name that we specified in the create call. So that wraps it up for the first step, which is to create your Lambda function.